The feeling of those wraps is so close to being swaddled that oftentimes if you start out with a baby carrier that is more of a wrap. Hi everyone, welcome back to today's episode of the Hyla Home. Here we talk about motherhood, natural living, and homemaking, which includes renovating our 1940s home. Today I'm going to be sharing with you my tips on how to make a baby like the carrier if you were having some issues trying to get your baby into a baby carrier. Now, as you know, if you've been watching some of my day in the life videos, or if you follow me on Instagram, I rely so much on baby carriers. They allow me to get everything I need to get done around the house. It helps me get some exercise in when I'm going on walks, and it even helped me back to the time when I had my first and was still working full-time, allowing me to keep my job because I was able to baby wear her while I was working. So I'm here to share with you my experience because my daughter did not like the baby carrier when I first started using it, and because it is such an essential tool for new moms, I want to share my tips for what I did to get her to like baby wearing so that I could use the baby carrier when I was working and needed it. So without further ado, let's get started. So these tips really work best if you're using them on a baby that is between 0 to 3 months old. Once a baby is a little bit older than that, it can get a little bit tricky. However, generally around that time they have more torso strength. You can put them in more structured carriers, and they tend to want to be on you all the time anyway. So baby wearing kind of transfers to being easier during that stage. The tips I have specifically are ones I used on my daughter when she was 2 months old, or almost 2 months old, and did not like the baby carrier at all. She cried as soon as I put her in the carrier. She tried to get out of it, she fussed, and so these are the tips that I used and helped her eventually really like the baby carrier. So tip number 1 is using a stretchy wrap. And I know this can be very difficult because the stretchy wraps are these long pieces of fabric that you have to wrap all the way around your body, and it can be very tricky, especially if you're not super intuitive with stretchy woven type materials. Now, they have some alternative stretchy wraps. The Baby Catan is a great one. I have that one and I really like it. Moby Baby has one. Mom Cozy has one, and there are a couple of great other ones out there that you can use for your baby. But for me, I actually like the traditional wrap. My favorite one is the Solly Baby Wrap. Second is the Boba Serenity Wrap, and together those make amazing stretchy wraps for the baby. A stretchy wrap simply means that it stretches as opposed to a woven wrap which does not stretch. You can have 2 types of stretchy wraps. One stretch both long ways and wide ways, and some of them only stretch one way. The Solly Baby is a one stretch, so it doesn't stretch both ways, it only stretches one way, and the Boba has the stretch in all 4 directions. So I really like both of those wraps, and the feeling of those wraps is so close to being swaddled and being in the womb that oftentimes if you start out with a baby carrier that is more of a wrap, it makes them feel very secure and not as likely to not like the baby carrier. I had the Ergo Baby Embrace, and none of my children liked that carrier because it just didn't have that same snug feeling around their bodies, and so starting with a stretchy wrap is a great way to get your baby to like baby wearing. They feel secure, swaddled, and close to your chest. So tip number 1 is to start with a stretchy wrap and to go from there. My second tip is only trying the wrap or the baby carrier that you're using for a few minutes at a time. When I started trying to get my daughter to like the baby carrier, what I did is I would tie it very loosely around my body, stick her in it, and just sit with her with my arms cradling around her for maybe 5 to 10 minutes at a time. I would soothe her, and as soon as she started to get uncomfortable, I would take her out and we were done. Eventually these stretches got longer and longer, and I started putting on the carrier correctly so that she would feel what the carrier was supposed to feel like around her body. But doing it at these short intervals at a time really allowed her to adapt to this new thing and get comfortable being worn. Now, it can be kind of tricky at first because unless you have lots of time on hand, putting your baby in and out of a carrier, especially as a new postpartum mom who doesn't have a lot of energy, can be kind of a daunting task. But I really encourage you, if this is something you want to do, taking the time to do that patience, putting your baby in, trying to soothe them for between 5 and 10 minutes at a time can really help build their like and enjoyment for this carrier. So that's tip number 2 for getting your baby to like the baby carrier. Now, this tip is kind of one I just touched on, but is start with loosely tying or loosely using the structured carrier around your body. So if you're using the stretchy wrap, tying it very, very loosely, and if you're using a soft structured carrier, putting it on very loosely. Now, I do want to warn you, the reason they have you put these on tighter and more securely is so that it keeps your baby from falling. So you are going to increase your fall risk, which is why I don't recommend that you wear it around the house like it. You're just going to put it on very loosely, put your baby in the carrier, and then sit in a chair. If you want to stand up because your baby's fussy, then do that. Make sure you're holding the baby and that the baby's primary support is coming from your hands and not the carrier. The point of this is not so that they're being carried by the carrier, but rather that they're getting used to being in the carrier and having the carrier around their body. And so you're putting it on more loosely so it's not squeezing them as hard and it's not making them uncomfortable. So by having it a little bit more loose, not only does it allow you to slip them in and out much easier, but it also allows them to feel that extra fabric around them and get used to that. My first was really opposed to swaddling, so this was a very good way to introduce her to the carrier since the carrier felt so much like swaddling. And so for her, this was one of the key things that I did. I put the wrap on very loosely and I stuck her in it with the fabric around her, and I sat back in a rocking chair and just rocked her gently and tried to comfort her, and I would do that for 5 to 10 minutes at a time. And then when I moved on to the soft structured carrier, when she got a little bit bigger, I did the exact same thing, especially keeping the shoulders very loose so that it wasn't pulling across her chest, and just rocking back and forth with her, getting her used to that sensation of being in the carrier. So that's tip number 3 for getting your baby to like the baby carrier. Tip number 4 can be a little bit tricky, especially if you're not super comfortable with whipping the girls out anytime you need to nurse, but is nursing in the baby carrier. One of the things I did, especially starting off, is nurse in the carrier. And this really helped because I followed the other steps of sitting down and rocking with my daughter while she was in the carrier and also having the carrier on so loosely. So when you have a wrap loose on you, you are actually able to nurse in the carrier. And for me, because I was already just trying to get her comforted in the carrier, one of the things I did was nurse her in the carrier because I wanted her to see that the carrier was a place of comfort and support from me. So in addition to the other tips that I've just shared, sitting down in the chair, having it loosely around me 5 to 10 minutes at a time, I also nursed her during those intervals so that she would know that this was a place of comfort. You can also nurse in a soft structured carrier. It's actually easier to nurse in a soft structured carrier. You just loosen the straps down at the sides right here, and you pull the strap forward, you kind of push your baby down, and you let them have access to nursing. Now, you should not rely on this position for carrying. It's not a fully supported position, and so you'll want to make sure that when your baby is done nursing that you readjust everything tight so that it's not loose and your baby is not at risk for falling. Now, one of the things I'm going to add, because I thought I was getting this wrong so many times when I first started baby wearing, is if you are nursing a little tiny baby between 0 to 3 months in a stretchy wrap, you're actually going to have to loosen the stretchy wrap and untie it. Now, I didn't know this and I always thought I was doing something wrong. When you're wearing a stretchy wrap with a 0 to 3 month old, the wrap should in theory be so tight that you can't nurse in it and will need to loosen it. Once your baby gets a little bit bigger and heavier, this is not necessarily the case, but when your baby's still so small and needing to be higher up on your chest so that they're the distance that you can kiss the top of their head, you're going to have to untie the wrap if you're going to want to nurse them. So that's kind of why I give the other points, is because if you're having your baby wrapped a little bit looser anyway, it's going to be easier to nurse them and in turn make them more comfortable with the wrap. Now that is all for today. I've run out of time because everyone woke up per the usual. Thank you all so much for joining me. You all have a great day. Thanks and bye.